Welcome to the Horror Next Door. This is all the horror movies we watched in August 2023. Links to our Letterboxd accounts are in the description box below. If you like this video, would you kindly subscribe?
Benny Loves You from 2019, which was viewed on Paramount Plus. It's possible that I enjoyed this way more than I should have. Benny was just insanely cute. Everything was so over the top. It almost reminded me of Shaun of the Dead type of humor, just a little bit more extreme. It's a similar type of goofy humor that is likable, but so ridiculous. The cops, for example, when they come to the main guy's house multiple different times, could have seen things that would have been evidence, would have sealed the deal, would have solved the case, but there's always something ridiculous that happens. Personally, I thought this was a very enjoyable watch and that it was lots of fun. I think that if you are going to go into a movie about a killer stuffed bunny, I believe he is, and judge it harshly, then you're probably just not watching the right movie. I mean, what can I say? Obviously, it's going to be silly. That's what made it fun. It is good times. I do recommend this movie.
So I would definitely agree that this movie is ridiculous and it was definitely a fun watch. Honestly, I really just love all the shots where Benny is on screen. He's always saying random little things or just shaking his head around and stuff like that. And there's a couple of shots where he's flying through the air, sometimes in slow motion. And it's just funny, but not funny in like a ha-ha way, just kind of funny in the this is so absurd and hilarious that I love it kind of way. If you've been following our What We Watched videos, we talked about a film called Killer Sofa a few episodes ago. When I spoke about that movie, I said that the movie should have just been a straight up slasher type movie with the sofa just killing people and not some over elaborate storyline. And I feel like Benny Loves You is exactly what I was talking about. This movie is kind of like an over-the-top slasher flick in a way, and at the same time, he's trying to not have anyone come between him and his owner. By the end of the film, I was really hoping that they make a sequel to this. I'm not sure if they're planning on making a sequel or not, but it would really be great if Benny returned. I would love to see him again. I had blast watching this movie, and I highly recommend it. Go check it out.
Talk to Me from 2022, which I saw in the theater. I don't know what it was about the trailers that I saw for this movie, but they really made it look terrible. It wasn't until I saw many of the people that I mutually follow on Letterboxd rating this very highly and saying it was so good. One day I just randomly acquiesced and decided I am going to go see this in the theater, and I do not regret it. There have been plenty of times where movies have been hyped up and I have been extremely disappointed. A quote-unquote supposed horror film I can think of offhand right now is The Lighthouse, which is also A24, by the way. There were definitely a couple of very disturbing and super weird parts that legitimately made me uncomfortable, but as an overall film and just plain gnarliness that like blindsided me out of nowhere because I was not expecting it from the way the film was marketed. I mean, hell, maybe that was purposeful. I just said in our last trailers video that it's a good thing when you don't reveal too much, and maybe this movie is proof of that. All I can say is I was pleasantly surprised and I was genuinely shocked. I would like to watch it again once it's released on streaming or physical media or whatever. I don't remember what exactly I was looking up, but I saw somewhere that they might be making a sequel. Sometimes a sequel can be a major crapshoot, so I don't know how excited I am for that, but I do highly recommend this movie if, like me, you thought it looked cheesy and corny and just plain annoying, honestly. I mean, I wouldn't say any of the characters in the movie are likable, and it's because they're annoying and they're brats, but the film still manages to be good, and you do start caring about especially the main character eventually, at least I did. So again, I definitely recommend the movie. Shockwaves from 1977, which we watched on Peacock. This film was actually recommended by Jester2952 in our YouTube comments. Thank you so much, Jester. We love getting recommendations. So for me, Shockwaves was pretty enjoyable. I definitely think there were times where I was laughing and they clearly didn't intend for things to be funny. I think that's pretty common depending on when you were born. I know there are people that were born way, way after me. I talk like I'm 100, but I am. I'm a vampire. Anyway, people who would watch an 80s or 90s movie now and be like, what the hell is that phone? They wouldn't even know what a landline or a cassette tape or a vinyl record or something is. So I guess I just mean that it's probably pretty common for people that were born after something was made to view it a little bit humorously or a little bit differently. I did think that the zombies were really cool. I was just confused about the rules per se, because it seemed like once you broke their sunglasses or whatever they were wearing, that they were vulnerable. But I think there was at least one time, if not a couple, where someone knocked the glasses off and it was still daytime and the zombie didn't really react to it. I'm not sure if I misinterpreted, but I also don't really know that anybody's necessarily watching this movie for logic's sake or for it to make sense. It's literally about Nazi zombies coming out of the ocean and killing people. They don't even really eat people, so it's not typical zombies. They were trained to kill. They are described as zombies in the synopsis, and they certainly look like zombies with their rotting flesh and stuff, but they're not going to eat your brains. They're still pretty freaking scary, and I enjoyed watching this movie. I would recommend watching it at least once.
So I would have to agree that the zombies in this movie are not really zombies, but they look awesome. I think whoever did the special effects makeup on them and the costumes that they're wearing and everything, they look great. I really wanted to enjoy this movie more than I actually ended up liking it. And I think it's mainly because the kills in the movie kind of get a little repetitive, in my opinion. Not to spoil anything for you, but all their kills kind of just revolve around water. I'll just leave it to that. I guess I was expecting a little bit more, especially with the fact that they're described as zombies and they're described as these, trained killers and all this stuff. No one ever gets ripped apart or eaten alive or just anything that would have blood involved. Let me just put it like that. I feel like the lack of innovation in the kills department is really what just lost my interest as the movie played on. I did like the setting, the big abandoned mansion and the, remote tropical island setting was really cool. And obviously, I love the way that the Nazi zombie guys look. I think if the kills were a little bit more diverse, I probably would have liked this movie a lot more, but I would still recommend it. It's still a great flick from the 70s. Thank you, Jester2952, again for recommending this movie. You're awesome.
Bones and All from 2022, which was watched on Amazon Prime. Seeing these trailers, I was left very indifferent and more leaning towards not really wanting to watch this film, but my streaming device was showing this on the home screen as being available free on Prime. I had some meal prepping to do, so I figured I would just put it on while I was in the middle of cooking. If I missed stuff, I wouldn't really care that much. I will say it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. It's just very middle of the road for me. I think what I liked about it was there was good acting. There was a lot of style. I loved the way that they revealed the main character's ailment. I don't know what to call it. It's quite obvious from the trailer alone what her deal is. So I'll just say the way they revealed that she eats people. It was a really cool build-up between the present and the past, the way the initial shock of it happened because she didn't know anything about it. I don't know that I necessarily bought the relationship between the two main characters. I guess there was chemistry, but it just didn't seem like they meshed all that well in my opinion. So when they did finally get together, it didn't really hit me emotionally all that much, which meant that the end didn't have that much of an impact on me either. I found myself wishing that they would have ended the film before the flash to the future. Kind of would have just rather had the credits roll there and have it be over. There were some really cool gory parts. I thought it looked really cool, and I noticed that it had a lot of great music. So I would loosely recommend it. It's definitely on the what some may call artsy-fartsy side a little bit.
Awakening the Zodiac from 2017, which I watched on a Netflix disc. So as Netflix disc rental services slowly comes to an end, I think September 29th is the last day they will be shipping out discs. You will probably see an influx of us renting Netflix discs until that ends to try to finish up our queues. I actually never heard of this movie until I was watching the trailers at the beginning of a different Netflix disc I had rented, and this was one of the trailers on it. So I immediately just added it to my queue because I wanted to check it out. I've always been fascinated with the Zodiac serial killer and just the fact that nobody ever found out who he was. He was never caught. So I thought this movie was a little interesting. The fact that it's so much time has gone by and now these people are finding stuff that belongs to the Zodiac and then trying to crack one of the ciphers that was never cracked, ultimately leading to the Zodiac himself coming out of hiding, and chaos ensues in the process. In the end, this movie is just an average watch, but it was fun. If you are into the Zodiac serial killer type stuff, then you will probably enjoy this one like I did. It's definitely nowhere near as good as the movie Zodiac with Jake Gyllenhaal and all those actors. That movie is a 5 out of 5. This movie, a little bit more average, but I would definitely recommend it, especially if you are into the Zodiac killer. Check it out.
Clinical from 2017 was watched on Netflix streaming, and literally I only put it on because it has Vanessa Shaw in it. I've been a fan of her since I was little because she was in Hocus Pocus and Ladybugs, which are two movies that I watched a lot. And more recently, obviously, she was in a few horror films. The remake of The Hills Have Eyes and We Need to Do Something come to mind. Anyway, there's not a whole lot to say about this movie. I thought there were some really cool visuals and gory parts, and I thought she did a great job acting-wise. The story itself, I mean, I don't know if it's because I wasn't paying full attention to it. We had it just randomly playing while I was doing work, but I felt a little bit confused. And the ending was a what? Fuck kind of moment. Can't fully recommend this movie. I guess I would just say if you're doing something else and kind of half paying attention like I was, you're laying in bed and you would be okay with falling asleep and missing some of the movie kind of a thing, then it would be a good thing to pick.
Seventh Moon from 2008, which I watched on a Netflix disc. So I watched this towards the beginning of the month of August, and I am having a hard time kind of remembering what happened in this movie. But what I do remember is this movie is directed by Eduardo Sanchez, who is best known for directing the Blair Witch Project. And this movie is another found footage type flick, but for some reason I just had a hard time getting into this one. It wasn't a very fun watch, and it was kind of a slog to get through in my opinion. There wasn't really anything too memorable in this one, so honestly I do not recommend it.
I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House, which I also watched on Netflix streaming, was a movie that had been on my list for an extended period of time. I've always been intrigued by that cover with the blonde gal in period garb and her arms are bent back. It's creepy and weird. Also, I didn't even know until quite recently that Oz Perkins was Anthony Perkins' son. The only thing that I ever knew Oz Perkins from was Dead and Breakfast, which I freaking love that movie. It is hilarious and fun, and I own it, and I've seen it a bunch of times. I picture him as this undead zombie dude dancing around singing, "We're coming to kill ya, we're coming to kill ya." Like, I had no idea that A, he was Anthony Perkins' son, and B, that he was the director of The Black Coat's Daughter or Gretel and Hansel. Looking at him now that I know, I definitely see the Anthony Perkins in him. I'm also starting to pick up the vibe that his films that he directs have, and he actually wrote this as well. By the way, the movie's from 2016. I feel like I just started going off without saying the year. But anyway, I think that a lot of people dislike this film because not a lot happens. There is not a bunch of jump scares, loud noises, monsters, gore. It's very bare bones. But in doing the film that way, it does give off an eerie tone. I'm not gonna lie. I wasn't paying full attention. I did walk out of the room a couple times because I was doing chores and things like like that. But I liked what I did see. I thought the acting was superb. I thought a lot of the things that he put in here were really creative and cool. I liked the way things that were happening in the house were related to the author's books. And I loved the way that the ghost, Lucy Boynton's character, looked. She looked so pristine and so perfect all of the time. And then sometimes you would see her as a ghost with like dead eyes and her super pale skin, and it was a drastic difference. It was subtle makeup wise, but it was so drastic from how perfect she looked all the rest of the time. I just think visually the movie was freaking awesome and the acting was amazing. So I definitely recommend it, but this is definitely an artsy fartsy type of horror or elevated horror, if you want to call it that. So don't watch this if you know this is not the kind of thing you're going to be into.
Crawl from 2019, which I watched on my Blu-ray copy. I have not seen this movie in a very long time and just wanted to check it out again. It had been a while, so I said screw it. This movie is directed by Alexandre Aja. I think I am pronouncing that correctly. Who the heck knows? He directed the Piranha remake, High Tension, which I highly recommend, the Hills Have Eyes remake, which is one of the better remakes, and also Horns with Daniel Radcliffe. But if you haven't seen Crawl, I definitely recommend you check it out. There are a lot alligator or crocodile horror films out there, just like there's 1,000 shark movies out there, but only a few stand out amongst the crowd that is of the alligator subgenre of horror films. And I think this is one of them. Maybe we should do like a top 10 alligator horror flicks or something. I don't know, but this is definitely one of the ones that stands out. I love this movie. Although most of the alligators are CGI, the CGI actually looks really damn good. This movie came out in 2019 and I'm watching it in 2023 and it still holds up. Still looks great. But I definitely recommend this movie. It is a non-stop just thrill ride throughout. Needle from 2010, which I watched on a Netflix disc. This is one of those movies that I've had on my Netflix queue for years. And honestly, I can't even remember why I originally added it. I'm not sure what I was looking at. I don't know, but I added it to my queue and it's probably been on my queue for like 10 years or some crazy crap. This movie probably should have taken it off of my queue a long time ago. The poster, I think, is a little ridiculous. It kind of looks like it's sort of ripping off of Hellraiser a little bit. I don't know. It reminds me of Hellraiser at least. The only redeeming thing about this movie, in my opinion, is the gore effects. Obviously, it's not anything top notch, but the movie itself is rather boring. So when the gore effects do happen, it gives you at least something to look at, something to enjoy. There's this mechanical box, and the mechanical box makes these little voodoo dolls, and there's somebody taking these dolls, doing things to them that people do to voodoo dolls. They're stabbing them and ripping their arms off and things like that. And then it's happening to the people in real life. So you can just use your imagination of how that's going to play out. And it pretty much turns into a whodunit type of deal. Who's the person doing this to these dolls? I wouldn't recommend this movie. Honestly, it wasn't really that fun to watch. But if you're curious enough to check it out, at least there's the gore and there is that whodunit guessing game. I guess you can play with it. But honestly, I wouldn't recommend it.
Bad Candy from 2020, which was watched on Tubi. It is the end of August when I decide to put this on. I know Corey Taylor's in it from Slipknot. Oh, and Zach Galligan is in it too from Gremlins. I just wanted to feel the Halloween vibes. I hate summer. I want it to be over. I want fall. I want Halloween. This film was something I was hoping would put me in that mood and get me in that spirit. And unfortunately, it was really pretty friggin' bad. It is an anthology film. film, and I think you can tell even just from the cover that they are trying to trick or treat it up. I did not even realize, maybe I wasn't paying full attention to the movie, maybe I was tired, I probably got on my phone because it kind of sucked at sometimes. I did not realize that the clown thing that they showed in every single short, except I think one, which was weird, clown guy who was kind of supposed to be the little Trick or Treat Sam character in this, was named Bad Candy. I didn't know that's where the title of the movie came from, and I watched the credits because there were bloopers, so that was really the only way I even learned that. But it's clear that they had some budgetary issues. The CGI was some of the weirdest and most awkward I've ever seen. I think the only thing in the whole movie that looked good was this really, excuse my language, but fucking awesome bat monster character thing. I feel like they put most of the budget into that and getting Corey Taylor. It just intrigues me when a musician is in a horror film. Let me narrow that down a little bit. A metal musician. I really could not give a flying fart about Lady Gaga or Taylor Swift being in a goddamn movie, and as far as I'm concerned, that's a detriment, but I digress. Bad Frickin' Candy was a bad frickin' movie. I also can't remember a lot about it other than that when they were trying to be humorous, it almost never landed. So I do not recommend this movie. It gets the job done if you just want to feel those fall Halloween feels. There are some moments and there is some imagery that accomplish that goal. Maybe play this in the background while you're decorating for Halloween and not paying attention to it. That's the best I can do.
Neighbor from 2009, which I watched on a Netflix disc. Another movie that has been on my queue for ages, and I'm just now getting around to watching it. With Needle, I could not figure out why I added that to my Netflix queue, but Neighbor, halfway through the movie, I figured out a possibility of why I added this to my queue. And halfway through the movie, I realized that the lead actress in the film, the neighbor, as you will, the killer of the flick, is played by America Olivo. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but she was actually in the Friday the 13th, 2009 reboot. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. It's the woman from the very beginning that dies in 2 seconds. She's the killer of this movie. Maybe I was looking people up from Friday the 13th, 2009, discovered this movie, added it to my queue. That's the only thing I can think of why I rented this movie. So although I would not recommend this movie, I actually did have a lot of fun watching this movie. Fun in the sense of there's so many ridiculous things that take place that make me just question things, and it became fun. The biggest thing that really got to me about this movie is this woman is going around constantly killing people. You see her kill several different people in several different houses before she finally gets to like the main characters, the guys. And she's never wearing any gloves. She's walking around this house or these people's houses touching everything. She touches everything in the house. I'm not even joking. She touches everything. She ultimately kills these people in their own home and then just moves on, goes to another town, finds another house to go to, and repeats. But there's a part in the movie where there's like a news broadcast and they're like, oh, there's still no leads on this killer that's going around and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, how is there no leads? This girl is touching everything. She's going around and like making sandwiches, touching the fridge, touching knives and stuff, and pouring herself drinks, touching cups and stuff. It's just like, give me a break. At least make it a little bit realistic. If she was going around wearing gloves or something like that, okay, I get it. They don't have any leads. But she's even walking around barefoot. I mean, come on. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it and not having fun with it. But honestly, by the end of the movie, I did kind of have fun with it. Ultimately, I would not recommend this, but if you just wanted to watch a ridiculous horror movie to have fun with, maybe it's late at night and you just want to watch something to turn your brain off, check it out. Home from 2016, which I rented on a Netflix disc. The only reason I watched this movie, and the only reason why I added it to my queue to begin with, is because it stars Heather Langenkamp from the Nightmare on Elm Street series. But I'm telling you right now, do not watch this movie. Do not fall into the same trap I did by saying, oh, a newish horror film starring Heather Langenkamp? Let me check it out. No, do not watch it. You're not missing anything. Barely anything happens, and it's awful. I'm sorry. Do not recommend. 2001 Maniacs Field of Screams from 2010, which I watched on a Netflix disc. I only watched this movie because it has Bill Moseley in it and Lin Shaye and also Ogre. And I'm going to be completely honest with you, this movie is not good at all. Really, the only reason to watch this is because of Bill Moseley and Lin Shaye and Ogre. Really, no other reason. I did not like the first 2001 Maniacs, probably because I'm just such a completionist. I had to see the sequel, but I do not recommend it unless you're a diehard Bill Moseley or Lin Shaye fan. Then skip this one.
Black Mountain Side from 2014, which was watched on good old Tubi. I think I am appreciating Tubi more now than ever because September is officially the last month that we are able to rent discs from Netflix, and I'm never going to get over it. I'm so sad about it. I'm trying my best to get through as much of my queue as I can. It's a futile, hopeless thing at this point. It just seems like a lot of the things that you can't find streaming anywhere else, and you could rent from Netflix discs, but that option's going away, are still available on Tubi. Back to the point, Black Mountain Side, I actually also had on my Tubi list for a really long time. I, at one point in time, just went through and added a bunch of wintry horror movies because I saw a couple covers in a row that were snowy looking, and this specific one is badass. There's a guy walking in the snow, and there's all this blood behind him in the snow. Also, if you read the synopsis, it does sound very similar to The Thing, and guess what? The movie itself is very similar to The Thing. It actually really just made me want to watch The Thing. But Black Mountain Side on its own was a fantastic watch, and I really enjoyed it. A lot of the stuff that happens in this is super crazy, and it's not over the top, dead alive, Benny loves you type horror and ridiculousness. It's just chaos is happening. You don't know who to trust, and there's very bloody and insane moments. It was just a really good watch. I'm just a big fan of cold, wintry horror films, and I always get a certain feeling when I watch them, and I got that feeling watching this. It was great. I definitely recommend this movie. If you're a fan of The Thing, I don't know how you couldn't like it. It's obviously a tribute. I mean, if any other filmmakers have ever said, no, this is our own thing. If they pulled like a Vanilla Ice with this Ice Ice Baby sample, oh, it's not the same, then I take it back. But I feel like this is quite clearly a tribute, and it was done lovingly, and I think it was done very well.
Tragedy Girls from 2017, which I watched on a Netflix disc. I actually ended up enjoying this movie much more than I thought I was going to originally when I turned it on. This is definitely like a horror comedy. I think the two lead actresses did a fantastic job. I think their chemistry was great. Just some of their banter and stuff and some of the comedic parts that they did was just all was entertaining for me. I like the idea that there's this killer out there that these two teenage girls kidnap and are like, hey, teach us how to be a killer. We want to be a killer too. I found that to be morbidly interesting. Obviously, chaos ensues. I won't give anything away. I honestly had a really fun time watching this one, so I would definitely recommend it. It says it's playing on Shudder and Tubi, so go check it out. Children of Sorrow from 2012, which I watched on a rented Netflix disc. So part of the movies that I'm trying to get through on my Netflix queue before Netflix shuts down their disc rental services are all the After Dark original films that I never actually got around to seeing. And I'm finally getting around to them. And this was the first After Dark original that I watched, Children of Sorrow. And honestly, this is just your run-of-the-mill guy starts a cult in the middle of nowhere type movie. Literally everything that you can possibly think of that would play out in a movie that's set up like that plays out exactly how you would think it would. There's really nothing special about this movie. The best thing I can honestly say about it is some of the gore effects are good, but in the end, I wouldn't recommend it. 51 from 2011, which I also rented on a Netflix disc. This was another After Dark original, and boy, this movie is not good at all. I'm sorry. There is nothing redeemable about this movie, in my opinion. I would not recommend it. It is on Tubi if you want to, if your heart desires. But if you go into this as if you're watching a straight up comedy, you'll probably have a really great time. But as a horror film, no, do not recommend it. Sanatorium from 2013, which I watched on a rented Netflix disc. Who would have guessed? This is also a After Dark original, and compared to the last two I spoke about, this one was the better of the three by a landslide. If anyone listening has seen Grave Encounters, this movie is definitely very similar to that in the sense that there's a group of young people. They have some kind of internet show where they go around and they investigate, haunted buildings and things like that. So they're at this abandoned sanatorium and they're checking things out. And as you guessed it, scary things happen. So for the most part, this movie is just another run-of-the-mill, generic, hey, let's run around in an abandoned building and scary things is going to happen. We're going to hear scary voices and things like that. Hey, I've seen all this before in a dozen other movies. But I think the ending really kind of separated it from other movies, in my opinion. There was some really cool imagery towards the end. That alone just makes this a decent horror flick to check out, especially when you compare it to the other After Dark originals that I've seen. There was one shot at the very end. I won't ruin it for you, but there's one shot at the very end. Pretty sure once you see the movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. So without spoiling it, pretty much when I saw that one shot, I said, well, this movie just went up at least half of star just for that one shot. Tremors 3, Back to Perfection from 2001, which I watched on a rented Netflix disc. So I have seen Tremors 3 before, but it's been a very long time and I honestly just don't remember anything about it. I obviously have seen the original Tremors, but I've seen Tremors 2, 3, and 4 and nothing beyond that. So I'm slowly renting the rest of the Tremors series so I can finally see all the movies in the series. I remember pretty much the gist of what happens in Tremors 2, but for some reason I can't find Tremors 2 to watch anywhere, so I started with 3. The basic plot of Tremors 3 is the Bert character, which if you haven't seen any of the Tremors movies besides the first one, Bert was in the first film. He's pretty much in all of these movies, actually. You see him there on the poster. He is going back to the town of Perfection, Nevada, which was in the first Tremors movie. I'm not exactly sure where they went in Tremors 2 because honestly I don't remember where it took place. But in this film, they're back to the original setting of the first film. There are some returning characters. The older man that runs the convenience store in the middle of the town, he's back, but now his daughter's like running the store and he's hanging out with Bert. Also, the Melvin character from the original Tremors makes a random appearance in like 2 scenes. So basically, the graboids show up and chaos ensues. But honestly, the thing that really downgrades the fun factor in this movie is they really went cheap on the special effects, in my opinion. There were a few shots in the movie, mostly close-up shots where you don't see much, in the distance or anything. It was mostly just a close-up shot of like the ground that I swear is just taken straight from the first Tremors film and then plucked and put right into this movie. I don't think it was filmed for this movie. It just looked very similar to me. I'm pretty sure if you were to do a comparison, it's the same. There's random shots of the graboid coming out of the ground and standing, way up in the air. And it just doesn't look good. I don't know what they did. Like the first movie came out in 1990 and this movie is 2001. So we're 11 years later, but the effects look worse. And I really don't understand why it looks so bad. And that honestly is what took me out of the film. I don't know. I was just baffled. I'm like, the original Tremors looks great. The special effects are great in that movie. But this movie, I guess they were just trying to save money. I mean, it probably was just a straight to video thing. So every time there's something to do with one of the graboids, sometimes it just didn't look good, depending on what was happening in the scene. But other than that, I mean, the movie was fun, but it wasn't the best. So it's just like an average or right down the middle flick. I'm slowly going to make my way through the rest of the Tremors movies, so make sure you're subscribed because I will definitely be talking about them. In the end, though, I think I would recommend Tremors 3. If you're a fan of the original Tremors, then definitely check out Tremors 3. You'll probably have fun watching it, but don't expect the same level of greatness as the original Tremors. The original Tremors, in my opinion, is a 5 out of 5 movie, but Tremors 3 is about right in the middle there. Even though they went a little cheap on the effects, the movie was still fun and it had some fun moments, but I would still recommend it. So go check it out.
As always, we thank you so much for watching. Leave us a comment if you have any horror movie recommendations and we will add them to our watch list. Until next time.